Imagine something goes wrong in a crowded room. Nobody knows exactly what happened. The moment hangs there. In that split second of confusion, people don't logically scan the room for the loudest person or the most obvious suspect. They just look at the usual target. This is the paradox of the perpetual scapegoat. It is that one individual who ends up absorbing the group's collective blame time and time again, regardless of whether they actually did anything wrong. It happens because assigning blame rarely requires an objective search for facts. It relies almost entirely on a calculation of perception. Sudden uncertainty creates immediate anxiety. To resolve that anxiety, the human brain needs a target, and it will subconsciously spring a psychological trap on specific types of behavior to find one. The trap usually snaps shut in the first few seconds after a crisis. While everyone else reacts, speaks over each other, or gets defensive, the eventual scapegoat stays perfectly quiet. That lack of an immediate defense creates an informational void. Without an active denial to process, the surrounding group fills the silence with suspicion. Then comes the physical reaction. Under the intense pressure of the spotlight, the accused person shifts their posture, hesitates, and breaks eye contact. This triggers a cognitive mismatch in the accusers. The group misreads the very real physiological discomfort of being scrutinized as objective evidence of a guilty conscience. Before a single fact is investigated or a single piece of evidence is weighed, those involuntary physical reactions have stripped the innocent person of their credibility. When the accused finally does speak, their attempt to defuse the situation usually backfires. They tend to offer a soft, hesitant explanation rather than a direct, forceful defense. Delivery dictates belief. A weak verbal response completely overrides the actual truth of their words, as the crowd processes a lack of confidence as a quiet admission of guilt. This flowchart illustrates the appeasement loop, a flawed coping mechanism. To escape immediate tension, the scapegoat says, "I'll fix it," absorbing pressure to keep the peace. Over time, this actively trains the group, turning them into an emotional dumping ground for collective failure. By constantly trying to solve the problem and appease everyone else, the scapegoat rewires the group's expectations. Soon, any responsibility they willingly take on converts into automatic, unquestioned blame. The behavioral spiral eventually reaches a point of no return. Isolated incidents fuse together into a permanent historical reputation within the group's memory. This timeline of accusation events shows cognitive pattern matching. During a crisis, people rely on past associations to make instant judgments, even if factually incorrect. Being blamed just twice builds a pattern, solidifying reputation and transforming the innocent into a permanent default suspect. Once that historical expectation is locked in, present-day facts are virtually useless. The crowd's brain will bypass objective evidence entirely to satisfy its established bias. It starts with an involuntary pause, a shifting shoulder, a soft voice, and a willingness to apologize. These micro-behaviors stack up into the macro-tragedy of the perpetual scapegoat. The collective mindset of the room shifts. The crowd completely stops asking the factual question of who did it and automatically jumps straight to the assumption, you did. A hesitant defense and a history of keeping the peace generate enough signal noise to drown out objective reality. It traps an innocent person in a cycle they cannot speak their way out of. Because when things go wrong, assigning blame rarely requires any actual guilt. It only requires the right perception.